I'm Sonia Schaefer, and I want to invite you to enter into a special season of celebration with us. Charlotte Mason has left a wonderful legacy, and we are celebrating a significant milestone this year. January 16, 2023, marks the 100-year anniversary of Charlotte's legacy. As we reflect on what she has meant to homeschooling, my mind goes back to the day I first heard about the Charlotte Mason method. It was at the end of my oldest child's kindergarten year. I went to a homeschool convention, and in one of the sessions, a speaker talked about various approaches you could take to homeschooling. I don't think she spent more than 5 minutes describing the Charlotte Mason approach, but what she said resonated with my heart, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I started learning and trying it, and learning more and refining what I was doing, and learning and tweaking and learning and tweaking, and I'm still doing that today. What's your story? How did you first learn about Charlotte Mason?
From before the time I was pregnant with my first child, I knew that I wanted to homeschool. And I knew that I did not want traditional textbooks. I wanted something different. But the only things I knew were traditional. I didn't want that. Unschooling, a little too freewheeling for me, and unit studies. And because I had 3 boys and a tomboy daughter, that seemed like a good fit. And we did that for a while. We enjoyed the books that the curriculum we used scheduled. Really enjoyed those. But after a couple of years, I realized that I was making all these connections for my children, and they just weren't getting it. And so we ditched the curriculum and kept the books, and then just kind of did our own thing. And as I was researching, finding books for different subjects, I realized that what I was doing had a name, and it was Charlotte Mason. And so then I was able to get Karen Andriola's book, The Charlotte Mason Companion, and learn more about it. And I wanted all those elements for my children, the poets, the composers, the artists. I didn't want spelling in the traditional way. I mean, all these different things that I desired for my children just fit so well with that.
Well, I was a college student, so I did not have children at the time, but I would go and spend weekends with my sister and her family. Quite often they were about an hour away, and her children had been in a private Montessori school when she felt the call to bring them home to homeschool, and she had purchased the Andriola's edition of Charlotte Mason's homeschool series. I love to read, and so whenever there was time, I would just pick things up and read them. And I started reading Home Education, and I was completely fascinated by it, especially because I was at a liberal arts school. And then seeing what a true liberal education was just fascinated me.
Well, years ago when I had a baby nursing at night, which are always my smartest years because all these quiet hours, I looked up different styles of education online, and there was a random blog post. I wish I knew what it was, but it didn't mean much to me at the time to remember it. And it had a quiz, and you take the quiz, and however you scored would be the type of education you might want to look into. And mine came up with Charlotte Mason. I had never heard of it. And for each type, it had a recommended book. And mine said, we recommend that you read For the Children's Sake. And so I ordered it, and it came, and I read it in a flash, late night nursing sessions, thank you. And I started crying because I recognized so many things that gave me words to express the feelings I had inside, but I didn't know how to articulate them. So it felt like someone had articulated all of the things that were moving inside of me, but I didn't have the vocabulary for those things. And so I knew in that moment that that's what I was going to do for my children, and I never looked back.
When I was a newlywed, my husband had a really dear friend that he wanted me to get to know. And so I started visiting this dear friend, Miss Crystal, and she just kind of took me under her wing She encouraged me. She invited me into her home to make bread. I just really enjoyed being in Crystal's home and loving her children, watching her love her children. The atmosphere of Miss Crystal's home is really what drew me to the Charlotte Mason method and philosophy, and I didn't know that's what it was called. She never labeled it as that. It was just very intriguing to me, and later on when I started having children, she kind of taught me what good books I should be looking for to read to them. She kind of trained me to encourage learning and having my children make good observations about things when we were outside playing. So it was very organic. And so as my children aged up, very conveniently, she started a monthly Charlotte Mason meeting. That community group was really where I was able to ask questions and learn more about the techniques and philosophy. It's where I started reading Charlotte's volumes. So those meetings were really instrumental in helping me understand how to implement it in my own home, and it kind of piqued more of a desire to want to know more. And so just through that sweet friend inviting me in her home and me loving that atmosphere, and then throughout the years being part of that community group is just really where I stepped in and just did it. And I've been doing it ever since. It's been about, we've been doing the meetings for about 12 years, and I've always used Charlotte Mason with my own children.
Most of you know Charlotte's motto for parents, that important three-legged stool on which her whole philosophy rests. Education is an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life. We need all three in order to maintain a healthy balance. First, education is an atmosphere. The more we learn about Charlotte's ideas and methods, the more it affects the atmosphere of our homes. Her approach is not just about academics. It's an attitude, a mindset, a lifestyle. And when I think about how her ideas have affected the atmosphere of my home, I think about all the wholesome occupations and wide interests that my children and I have developed over the years. Our lives have been enriched through beautiful art and lovely music and engaging handicrafts and time in nature and wonderful literary books and poetry. I don't know that we would have pursued any of that without Charlotte Mason. Now, those things have become a natural part of our lives.
I didn't have a relationship with a lot of the enrichments prior to coming to know Charlotte Mason. To me, I tell people I grew up in the air conditioning, and so I just didn't know what to do outside, and I felt very uncomfortable. I didn't ever spend time in nature even as a child. And so I think one area is that it has revolutionized my family's pastimes and how we spend a lot of our free time being outside and being very aware and attentive to our environment and all the beauty and wonder that we see, and lots of things to study and come home and write about and talk about and draw.
It has given me freedom. And what I mean by that is it's a beautiful thing when you realize that the education of your children are not completely dependent on the schoolwork itself. It is how you have conversations, it is how you minister at church, it is life experiences, it is taking care of your home. All of those things just really spoke to me and has affected our atmosphere. You know, life is messy and it doesn't always go as planned. And so over the years, I feel like the Lord has worked in my heart to be able to let the checklist go and to appreciate how the Lord teaches us lessons through those life experiences. And so understanding Charlotte and her philosophy and how we're teaching the whole person, how the Lord's working in our life, just was so freeing to know that it's not just the school work, it's how we're living our life. And so I'm really thankful that the atmosphere of our home is we're still diligent and try to be good stewards of our time and what we have, but there's just a freedom there that life can be lived, and we're still learning through that.
It changed my mind on what education was. Instead of just doing the work to get through to graduation, it became, I want to create lifelong learners. And that comes from forming relationships with what you're studying, not just checking the boxes to get through things.
So I've always appreciated music. I grew up playing the cello, but I never had given myself permission to sing. I'm not a singer. I don't have a beautiful voice. And so I kind of felt like singing was something for people who can sing, who are good at it. But doing this with my children, our house is always filled with music, and it's not beautiful, but it's fun and enriching and uplifting. And so that's something I never would have pursued without Charlotte Mason.
This was really a key idea to find out that the atmosphere of the home, one, was really generated by me. Mainly, it was my responsibility to keep a healthy atmosphere. And so to not just say things, but to actually walk those out really would reveal what I valued most. And so I think that Charlotte Mason really helped the atmosphere of the home become a sweet-smelling savor.
It also gave me more confidence in choosing books for my children's education because I had those guidelines of what a living book is and what it should do for your children.
I just didn't have a relationship with poetry. It's something that I thought was very kind of for those types of people, for the wild creatives, but not for just plain old me. What would plain old me do with poetry? But I was up for the challenge to share it with my children. And I remember the day where I found myself like, oh my goodness, I'm really enjoying this. And so our house is filled with poetry and music, and our days are extended outdoors, and none of that would have occurred without her.
Education is an atmosphere, but it's also a discipline. The discipline of good habits intentionally cultivated. We work on helping our children cultivate good habits while they are young, but we've also learned that even as adults, we can continue to work on instilling good habits for ourselves. I'm currently working on a habit of being as intentional with rest and leisure as I am with work. You know how Charlotte said that a new habit starts with an idea, a compelling idea? Well, I've been hearing and reading a lot about intentional rest and leisure lately. It's been a gradual process, but now I'm up to the point where I'm trying to schedule and commit to times of rest as much as I do to times of work. It really helped when I read that Miss Mason considered leisure to be as important as work, for it is during leisure that ideas are sifted and grow. In Memoriam, page 203. So I'm working on prioritizing leisure and rest times as much as work times. It's a tough one for me, but I am, I can, I ought, I will.
Habits have always been part of our homeschool life. It's really been part of our life. I had 4 children, really close together, so habits are really what saved me in those early years. And so I've not been a stranger to habits. Over the years, we've been more consistent than other times. We've worked on different things that I've really needed my kids to learn. I've worked on habits that I have needed, so it's definitely looked different over the years. At this point, there's a lot that are well-oiled machines that naturally happen because of the earlier years of doing the habits, so I'm very thankful for that.
Since my children are all graduated now, in a way, it gave me a lot of freedom that I hadn't had before. And so what I've had to begin working on was to tame that filly of inclination by finishing projects before I start another one, or to schedule projects so I'm only working on them for a certain amount of time and not being distracted by other things.
Well, there's so many to work on in our lives. Trying to be more compassionate to people and not just jumping to conclusions about why they do things the way they do or the way that they act. And then also more practical things like trying to be more careful of how much I eat and what I eat.
I am right now working on the habit of a quiet word, a quiet response. And I think that in the moment of multiple children running around and mommy, 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 mama, mommy, mama, 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 mommy, and I could feel myself, what? And even time when I'm doing things on my computer and a little hand comes over my arm and I'm thinking, what do you want? Like, I just gave you food. I give all this. So now you're asking me for something. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm online reading about how to be a better mother while I yell at the child who wants his mother. And so I think that in this season, I am really working on responding sweetly every time I hear the word mom.
The third leg of the stool is education is a life. Living ideas are powerful. They shape how we think, what we do, and who we become, no matter how old we are. Charlotte's words are full of living ideas that both challenge us and inspire us. Let me share a quote that has encouraged and shaped me. Charlotte wrote an essay called Children as Persons. It's included in the story of Charlotte Mason. Here's the statement from that essay that has been my companion for many years. We must bear in mind that growth, physical, intellectual, moral, spiritual, is the sole end of education. It's not about what my child should know by a certain age or what my child should be able to do by a certain age. It's about growth. Is my child growing? That's the only standard that respects each person as an individual. Now, as a parent of a child with special needs, I especially appreciate Charlotte's perspective. But for all of our children, it's a powerful idea to realize that education is not about measuring up to some random man-made standard. It's about recognizing the value that is inherently within that young person and encouraging her to grow as she is able in all aspects of personhood. That's true education.
The idea that struck me most was Charlotte Mason's great recognition, and that is that God is the supreme educator of my child, and not just during Bible lessons, but there was no separation between the secular and the spiritual when it comes to education. And so that brings me to my favorite quote in all of her volumes. Once we see that we are dealing spirit with the friend at whose side we are sitting, with the people who attend to our needs, we shall be able to realize how incessant is the commerce between the divine spirit and our human spirit. It will be to us as when one stops one's talk and one's thoughts in the springtime to find the world full of bird music unheard the instant before. In like manner, we shall learn to make pause in our thoughts and shall hear in our intellectual perplexities, as well as in our moral, the clear, sweet, cheering, and inspiring tones of our spiritual guide. What this says to me is that all throughout the homeschooling day, that I can be cooperating with the Holy Spirit and not just during the child's Bible lesson.
I feel like I just need to start on page 1 and then read through every page, but I'll spare you and just share this one. But our fault, our exceeding great fault, is that we keep our own minds and the minds of our children shamefully underfed. The mind is a spiritual octopus, reaching out limbs in every direction to draw in enormous rations of that which under the action of the mind itself becomes knowledge. So I think that idea of the spiritual octopus just really speaks to me. I think that when I entered into this first learning about Mason, I definitely thought of making sure that things were kind of kiddie in my home and just giving the kids little kiddie things and things that aren't beyond their years and, oh, that'll be too difficult or they won't understand that. And so when I read this idea of our minds being a spiritual octopus, it gave me confidence to trust my children and to share interesting things with them and let them reach out with all those different tentacles in various directions and decide and determine what they walk away with. And what was so great about that, while I was doing that with my children and watching and expecting that from them, it was happening with me too.
There is an idea that Karen Andriola has shared and that Charlotte Mason has written about that has really inspired me, and it was when she talked about being soaked in goodness. What she meant by this is that we should be soaked in the Bible, we should be soaked in the humanities, which means art, music, literature. We should be soaked in nature study, and that we should be soaked in hero admiration. I love this idea of being soaked because it's really a good filter for all of life. Like, is this something that is good that we want in our life? Is this something good that will benefit us later on in our education or our thoughts? The key part of that teaching was hero admiration. And I love this idea because anytime we have heroes in our life, whether it's a real life person, someone we know, or maybe from a good book or from history, it's almost like we're inspired to be better than we are or to keep trying, even though when we admire this person, a lot of times we see our own deficiencies, and that can be discouraging. And this really resonated with me because for some reason, I thought I was not supposed to make mistakes in my parenting and how I homeschooled my children. And so I had to get this almost false doctrine like out of my mind that I could never make mistakes. And so when Charlotte taught about this hero admiration, it was like, it gave me such hope that even the heroes made mistakes. They struggled, they weathered the storms, and they kept going. And so I was really inspired by this idea of soaking in the goodness, trying to keep striving for things that are obtainable, even though I do make mistakes. It was just a beautiful thing, and that has stuck with me over the years.
I have two quotes. Both are from school education. The first one is, "The question is not how much does the youth know when he has finished his education, but how much does he care, and about how many orders of things does he care? In fact, how large is the room in which he finds his feet set, and therefore, how full is the life he has before him?" And the second one, "Let us try, however imperfectly, to make education a science of relationships. In other words, try in one subject or another to let the children work upon living ideas. In this field, small efforts are honored with great rewards, and we perceive that the education we are giving exceeds all that we intended or imagined." Both of these quotes echo what I wanted for my children's education. I wanted them to form relationships with what they were using for learning. I wanted them to be exposed to artists, composers, read real books. I wanted them to be out in nature, all of those things that a Charlotte Mason education encompasses. I knew that if they could form relationships with what they were using to learn, whether it was books or different materials, that they would remember that it was theirs. And I knew that from my own educational experience. The things that I remember about my own education are the things that I formed relationships with, whether it was through school or things that I did on my own outside of school. The second quote I really like because Charlotte Mason says, no matter how imperfectly we do this, that our children are going to still get a great education. So we don't have to be perfect in implementing these methods. We just have to try, and our children will just excel.
It is so encouraging to hear about what Charlotte Mason has meant to us and to our homes. I would love to hear your story. So in honor of this 100-year celebration, we've created a special place for you to join in this conversation. Just go to simplycm.com/100 to find out how you can share your thoughts in honor of Charlotte Mason, a wonderful lady who has given us so much.